Lady Octavia Blackwood's hands trembled as she clutched the final notice, the candlelight casting long shadows across her tear-stained face. Snow pounded against the windows of Willowbrook Manor as she gathered her courage, knowing the journey to Ravenmoor Castle might be her last hope. The Duke of Thornfield stood like a statue before his roaring fireplace, his steel-gray eyes narrowing as the bedraggled widow fell to her knees before him. "Please, your grace," Octavia whispered, her voice breaking as she thought of her frail sister asleep at home. Nathaniel Thornfield's cold smile spread slowly across his face as he extended a hand to lift her chin, his voice cutting through the howling wind outside. "I have a proposition for you, Lady Blackwood. One night for your freedom." The letter crumpled in Lady Octavia Blackwood's trembling hands, the harsh black ink blurring as tears threatened to fall. £50,000, an impossible sum. The final notice from Hargrove and Sons demanded payment within the month, or Willowbrook Manor, her ancestral home for 6 generations, would be seized to satisfy her late husband's gambling debts. "Octavia," a soft voice called from the doorway. "Is everything all right?" Octavia hastily wiped her eyes and tucked the letter into her desk drawer before turning to face her younger sister. At 19, Lydia was all delicate beauty and gentle spirit, her artistic hands stained with paint. The girl had no idea how dire their circumstances had become. "Of course, darling. Just some household accounts." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. "How is your new landscape coming along?" Lydia's face brightened, but the excitement couldn't mask the hollow cheeks or the slight wheeze in her breath. The winter had been hard on her weak lungs. "I've captured the light on the frozen lake perfectly this time. Will you come see?" "In a moment." Octavia forced a smile. "Take your medicine first, please." After Lydia retreated, Octavia locked the study door and retrieved the letter again. 3 years a widow at 27, and still drowning in Charles Blackwood's legacy of debt and dishonor. Her own modest dowry had vanished within months of their marriage, followed by every valuable piece of jewelry and art that wasn't entailed with the estate. Outside, snow began to fall, thick flakes swirling against the window panes. Winter had come early this year, harsh and unforgiving, just like their creditors. Octavia moved to the hearth, where the fire had dwindled to embers. They couldn't afford more coal until next week. Pulling her shawl tighter, she faced the harsh reality. There was only one person who might help her now, the Duke of Thornfield. Nathaniel Thornfield. Her late husband had borrowed heavily from the Duke's banking interests. The man known throughout London society as the Frost Duke for his merciless business dealings now held the majority of their debt. Stories of his ruthlessness circulated through drawing rooms like ghost stories. Debtors imprisoned, families ruined, no mercy shown regardless of circumstance. But she had to try, for Lydia, for Willowbrook. The journey to Ravenmoor Castle took 3 grueling days through worsening weather. By the time Octavia's hired carriage approached the imposing stone fortress on the northern moors, a full blizzard had descended. The castle loomed against the white sky, all sharp angles and ancient stone, as unwelcoming as its master was rumored to be. "I cannot take you further, my lady," the driver shouted over the howling wind. "The horses won't make it up that path in this storm." Octavia stared at the steep road ahead, her heart sinking. "Wait here, I'll walk." The wind cut through her cloak like knives as she trudged upward, snow soaking her boots and hem. Each step required all her determination, her mind fixed on Lydia's fragile smile, on the generations of Blackwoods who had called Willowbrook home. By the time she reached the massive oak doors, Octavia could barely feel her fingers. She pounded with the heavy iron knocker, praying someone would hear over the storm. A stern-faced butler eventually appeared, his expression shifting from annoyance to shock at finding a half-frozen woman on the doorstep. "Lady Blackwood to see his grace," she managed through chattering teeth. "It's urgent." "His grace sees no one without appointment." The butler began to close the door. "Please." Octavia wedged her foot in the gap, desperation overcoming propriety. "Tell him it concerns the Blackwood debt. I've come all this way through the storm. I won't leave without seeing him." Something in her voice, perhaps the raw desperation, made the butler hesitate. After a long moment, he stepped aside. "Wait in the entrance hall. I make no promises. The castle interior was surprisingly warm, though no less intimidating. Ancient tapestries depicting hunting scenes and battles hung between towering windows. A massive fireplace roared with flames that did little to soften the austere atmosphere. Octavia stood dripping onto the marble floor, her sodden cloak growing heavier by the minute. Pride demanded she remain standing, though exhaustion threatened to buckle her knees. 20 minutes passed before footsteps echoed down the corridor. The Duke of Thornfield appeared like a figure from a dark fairy tale, tall and imposing, with raven-black hair streaked with silver at the temples. At 38, he carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to absolute authority. His steel-gray eyes assessed her with cold precision. Lady Blackwood. His voice was deep, cultured, devoid of warmth. You've traveled a long way to disturb my evening. Octavia dropped into a curtsy, wincing as her frozen joints protested. Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace. I wouldn't have come if the situation weren't desperate. It must be, for a lady of your standing to arrive unannounced, unescorted, and looking like a drowned rat. His gaze swept over her bedraggled appearance with undisguised disdain. I assume this concerns your husband's considerable debts. Yes. Octavia swallowed her humiliation. I've received final notice. 1 month to pay £50,000, or Willowbrook will be forfeit. And you expect me to extend the deadline out of the goodness of my heart? A cold smile curved his lips. I'm afraid you've wasted your journey, Lady Blackwood. Business is business. Octavia's last shred of dignity crumbled. She sank to her knees on the hard marble. Please. My sister is ill. The journey would kill her. Willowbrook is all we have left. For a moment, something flickered in the Duke's eyes. Something almost human. Then it vanished, replaced by calculating interest. Come to my study, he said abruptly. You're leaving puddles on my floor. We'll discuss terms. As Octavia followed him through the shadowed hallways, she couldn't know that her desperate journey had awakened something long dormant in the Frost Duke, or that the proposition he was formulating would change both their lives forever. The Duke's study was a testament to power and wealth. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, lined with leather-bound volumes. A massive oak desk positioned before a wall of windows that would, in daylight, command a view of the entire estate. Now they reflected only darkness, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the blizzard outside. Sit. The Duke gestured to a chair across from his desk as he poured 2 glasses of brandy. Octavia perched on the edge, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance in such immaculate surroundings. When he handed her the brandy, their fingers brushed momentarily. His were surprisingly warm. Drink. You're still shivering. She obeyed, the amber liquid burning a path down her throat. Thank you, Your Grace. Nathaniel. He settled into his chair, studying her over the rim of his glass. If we're to discuss business of this nature, we might as well dispense with formalities. Very well, Nathaniel. His name felt foreign on her tongue. He leaned back, one long finger tracing the edge of his glass. Tell me, Lady Octavia, what exactly do you propose? You cannot pay your debts. What do you offer instead? Time, she said quickly. Just a little more time. The spring harvest will be insufficient. His tone was matter-of-fact. Your estate has been mismanaged for years, even with perfect conditions. You couldn't generate enough to cover half your debt. Octavia's hands tightened around the glass. I could sell some of the land. To whom? In this economy? He shook his head. Your situation is hopeless by conventional means. Then what would you suggest? Desperation edged her voice. I'll do anything to save our home. The moment the words left her mouth, she knew she'd made a tactical error. Something predatory flashed in his eyes. Anything. He set down his glass with deliberate care. A dangerous offer to make to a man like me. Octavia's mouth went dry. I meant within reason. Of course. He stood, moving to stare out at the storm. Are you familiar with my situation, Lady Octavia? The abrupt change in topic confused her. Only what society gossips about. That you've never married, despite being the last of your line. There's more to it than that. His voice hardened. My title comes with an ancient entailment. If I die without legitimate issue, everything, the dukedom, the lands, the fortune, passes to a distant cousin I despise. I have 9 years remaining to produce an heir before the entailment becomes irrevocable. Octavia shifted uncomfortably. I don't understand what this has to do with my debts. He turned, his expression unreadable in the firelight. I have no desire for marriage. A previous entanglement cured me of any romantic notions, but I need an heir. Understanding dawned slowly, horribly. Heat flooded Octavia's face. You can't possibly be suggesting. I am precisely suggesting that. His voice remained calm, businesslike. Give me a child, and I will forget your debt, completely. The mortgage papers for Willowbrook will be delivered to you. Mark paid in full. Octavia stood so quickly, her chair toppled backward. That's outrageous. I'm a lady of good family, not a... Choose your words carefully. His tone chilled. I'm offering a business arrangement, not an insult. You would be handsomely compensated beyond the debt forgiveness. And what of the child? She demanded. What becomes of a child born of such an arrangement? He or she would be acknowledged as mine, raised as my heir with every advantage. You would have visitation rights, of course. Of course, she echoed hollowly. How generous. Nathaniel stepped closer, his height forcing her to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Consider your options realistically, Lady Octavia. You have none. In 1 month, you and your sister will be homeless, penniless, with no protectors. What becomes of a young, sickly girl like Lydia then? The mention of her sister's name from his lips felt like a violation, yet the truth in his words cut deeper. This is blackmail, she whispered. This is survival, he countered. For both of us, I need an heir. You need salvation. Octavia turned away, moving to the fireplace where she could hide her expression. And if there is no child? Nature doesn't always comply with business arrangements. We would try for 3 months. If unsuccessful, half your debt would still be forgiven, enough to keep Willowbrook, if managed carefully. Her mind raced through alternatives, finding none. Selling herself into marriage to another creditor would mean permanent subjugation, not just a temporary arrangement. At least this way, she maintained some independence. Why me? She asked finally. Surely there are women who would jump at such an offer. Actresses, widows of less stringent moral character. Something like respect flickered in his eyes at her directness. I need certain guarantees. You come from good stock, healthy, intelligent. Your family has no history of madness or deformity, and your situation makes you motivated. You've investigated me. It wasn't a question. Thoroughly. He didn't bother denying it. I know about your sister's condition. I know your late husband left you untouched for the final year of your marriage. So there's no risk of complications. The humiliation of having such private details known to this stranger burned like acid. Charles had indeed abandoned her bed in favor of gambling hells and courtesans. But to have this man know it. 1 night, she said suddenly, surprising herself. Not 3 months. 1 night only. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. That significantly reduces the chances of success. Those are my terms. Octavia straightened her spine. 1 night. If it results in a child, my debt is forgiven. If not, we part ways with half forgiven, as you offered. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, 1 night. But if unsuccessful, you'll have no claim on me for further assistance. I understand. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. We'll use my hunting lodge in Glenmorrow. More private. I'll make arrangements for next week. The businesslike tone, as he discussed the details of her debasement, was almost more than Octavia could bear. Yet somewhere beneath her shame burned a tiny, treacherous spark of relief. Willowbrook might be saved. Lydia would be secure. Do we have an agreement? Extending his hand as though they were concluding a standard business transaction. Octavia stared at his offered hand, knowing that to take it would change everything. Her reputation, her body, her future, all bargained away in a moment of desperation. We do, she whispered, placing her trembling hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, for the briefest moment. Something like regret crossed his features. Then it was gone, replaced by the mask of the Frost Duke once more. The arrangement is sealed then. He released her hand. My butler will show you to a guest room. The storm makes travel impossible tonight. As Octavia followed the servant through the dark corridors, she felt the weight of her decision settling over her like a shroud. One night to save everything she loved. One night to surrender the last thing that was truly hers to give. The hunting lodge in Glenmorrow stood in a secluded clearing, surrounded by ancient oaks and silver birches, built of stone and timber. It offered rustic luxury rather than the intimidating grandeur of Ravenmoor Castle. As Octavia's carriage approached at dusk, golden light spilled from the windows, a deceptively welcoming sight. A week had passed since her desperate bargain with the Duke, 7 days of alternating between numb resignation and panicked second thoughts. But here she was, stepping down from the carriage, her small valise clutched in white-knuckled hands. The door opened before she reached it. Nathaniel stood framed in the entrance, dressed more casually than she had ever seen him. A white shirt open at the collar, dark trousers, no cravat or waistcoat. The informality somehow made him more intimidating, more real. "You came." Something like relief colored his tone. "I keep my promises." Octavia lifted her chin, determined to maintain what dignity remained to her. However unpleasant, a muscle tightened in his jaw. "Come inside. It's getting cold." The lodge's interior surprised her. No hunting trophies or masculine trappings dominated the space. Instead, comfortable furnishings, well-stocked bookshelves, and a cheerful fire created an atmosphere of unexpected warmth. A table near the hearth was set for two, with covered dishes and wine already waiting. "I thought you might be hungry after your journey." Nathaniel gestured toward the table. The simple courtesy caught her off guard. She had expected to be led directly to a bedchamber. The transaction completed with brutal efficiency. "Thank you." Octavia removed her cloak, revealing the simple gray traveling dress beneath. She had deliberately chosen her plainest garment, refusing to dress as though this were a romantic assignation. They ate in silence at first, the only sounds the crackling fire and the clink of silverware against china. The food was excellent: roasted pheasant, winter vegetables, fresh bread, but Octavia could barely taste it. Her stomach knotted with anxiety. "Wine," Nathaniel offered, already reaching for her glass. "No." She placed her hand over the rim. "I prefer to keep my wits about me." He set the bottle down with a soft thud. "This doesn't have to be an ordeal, you know, doesn't it?" Octavia met his gaze directly. "What would you call surrendering one's body to a stranger to pay a debt? A pragmatic solution to mutual problems." His voice remained even, but something flickered in his eyes. "I have no intention of hurting you." Octavia laughed, a brittle sound. "How considerate." An uncomfortable silence fell. Nathaniel broke it with an unexpected question. "Was your marriage very unhappy?" The directness startled her into honesty. "It was empty. Charles married me for my dowry, then lost interest once the money was gone. I was furniture to him. And yet you mourn him. I mourn what might have been." She pushed her plate away, appetite gone. The family we never had. The partnership that never formed. Nathaniel studied her, his expression softening slightly. "You wanted children." "I wanted a family." Octavia looked down at her hands. Something real. Another silence, less tense than before. When she finally raised her eyes, Nathaniel was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Shall we get this over with?" she asked quietly. He stood, extending his hand. "Come." The bedchamber was simple but elegant. A large four-poster dominated the space, its covers already turned down. A fire burned low in the grate, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Octavia stood frozen just inside the doorway, her courage faltering. Nathaniel moved to a side table and poured a small measure of brandy into a glass. "For your nerves," he said, offering it to her. "Not to dull your wits." This time she accepted. The liquor burned pleasantly, spreading warmth through her chest. "Turn around," he said softly. "Let me help with your dress." Octavia obeyed mechanically, feeling his fingers work the buttons down her spine. His touch was impersonal, efficient, yet she couldn't suppress a shiver. "Cold?" he asked. "No." The honesty surprised her. The dress loosened, and she clutched it to her chest before it could fall. Nathaniel stepped back, giving her space. "I'll turn away," he offered, "until you're ready." That small courtesy, unnecessary in their arrangement, touched something in Octavia. She watched as he turned his back, removing his shirt to reveal broad shoulders and a muscled back marked with an unexpected scar that ran from shoulder blade to spine. She slipped out of her dress and undergarments, quickly sliding between the cool sheets. "I'm ready," she whispered. When Nathaniel turned, his eyes held something she hadn't expected: uncertainty, perhaps even nervousness. He extinguished all but one candle before joining her. "May I touch you?" he asked, his voice rougher than before. The question, so at odds with their business arrangement, undid her. Tears sprang to her eyes. "Yes," she managed. His hands were gentle, his touch exploratory rather than demanding. When his lips found hers, the kiss was tentative, questioning. Octavia had expected to endure this night, to lie passive and detached. She hadn't expected to respond, to arch into his touch, to discover pleasure she'd never known in her marriage bed. "Octavia," he breathed against her neck, her name a revelation on his lips. In the flickering candlelight, something shifted between them, something neither had anticipated. Not love, not even affection, but a connection, primal and undeniable. Their bodies spoke a language their minds refused to acknowledge. Afterward, as dawn painted the eastern sky with pale light, Octavia turned away, silent tears tracking down her cheeks, not for what she had lost, but for what she had unexpectedly found and must now abandon. Nathaniel watched her through half-closed eyes, his breathing carefully regulated to feign sleep. His fingers itched to brush away her tears, to pull her back against his chest. The unfamiliar urge disturbed him more than he cared to admit. By sunrise, she was gone from his bed. By noon, from his lodge. Only the lingering scent of lavender on the pillow remained to haunt his dreams. Emberley clung to the Cornish coastline like a determined barnacle, its stone cottages weathered by centuries of salt spray and wind. To the locals, the arrival of a widowed gentlewoman at her cousin's cottage was unremarkable. Lady Octavia Blackwood became Mrs. Blackwood, a quiet woman who kept to herself and took long walks along the cliffs when weather permitted. 3 months had passed since that night at Glenmorrow. 3 months of silence from Ravenmoor Castle, broken only by the arrival of a package containing the mortgage papers for Willowbrook. Paid in full, in bold black ink. No note accompanied them. No acknowledgement of what had transpired between them. Octavia had fled to her cousin Martha's cottage the day after receiving the documents. She'd told Lydia only that she'd reached an agreement with the Duke, some creative financial arrangement that had satisfied their debts. Her sister, overjoyed at keeping their home, hadn't questioned the miracle too closely. But Octavia couldn't stay at Willowbrook, not with the knowledge growing inside her, not with the memory of Nathaniel's touch haunting her dreams. Now she stood at her bedroom window, hands resting on the gentle swell of her stomach, 4 months along. Undeniable evidence that their arrangement had succeeded in its primary objective. "Tea, dear." Martha appeared in the doorway, her kind face creased with concern. At 60, the widow had welcomed Octavia without questions, accepting only the barest explanation for her sudden visit. "Thank you." Octavia turned from the window. "Any letters today?" "Just the usual from your sister." Martha set down the tea tray. "She says the new roof is holding splendidly against the spring rains." Octavia smiled faintly. The first thing she'd done with her newfound security was commission proper repairs for Willowbrook. Lydia's letters bubbled with excitement over each improvement, each small luxury they could now afford, all purchased with her body, with the child that grew within her. "You'll need to tell him soon," Martha said gently, pouring the tea. "The father." Octavia's hand instinctively moved to her abdomen. "He knows there will be a child." That was the arrangement. Arrangement? Martha's eyebrows rose. "Is that what the young people call it these days? It's complicated." Octavia sipped her tea, avoiding her cousin's shrewd gaze. "It always is, dear." Martha patted her hand. "But a child deserves both parents, when possible. He'll have the child." Octavia's voice hardened. That's what he wanted. An heir, nothing more. Martha studied her for a long moment. "And what do you want, Octavia?" The question caught her off guard. What did she want? She had saved Willowbrook, secured Lydia's future, fulfilled her part of the bargain. She should feel victorious, or at least relieved. Instead, she felt hollow. She hesitated. "I want to forget the look in his eyes that night. I want to forget how it felt when he said my name." Martha's expression softened with understanding. Oh, my dear, you've gone and fallen in love with him. No. The denial came too quickly, too forcefully. It was one night. A business transaction, if you say so. Martha rose, gathering the empty cups. But in my experience, the heart rarely consults the head before choosing its path. After her cousin left, Octavia returned to the window. The spring storm lashing the coastline matched her turbulent emotions. How could she possibly have developed feelings for Nathaniel Thornfield? The man had essentially blackmailed her, used her desperation against her, treated her body as a commodity to be purchased. And yet, she remembered his unexpected gentleness, the question in his eyes before each touch, the way he'd watched her in the firelight, as though memorizing every detail of her face. It doesn't matter, she told the empty room. The arrangement is complete. At Ravenmore Castle, Nathaniel Thornfield hurled his glass into the fireplace, watching with grim satisfaction as it shattered into glittering shards. 3 months of searching. And still his investigators could not locate her. Octavia had vanished like morning mist, leaving only the faintest trace. A brief note to her sister mentioning a visit to a cousin, no name or location specified. He'd had men discreetly watching Willowbrook, waiting for her return, but the sister remained alone, apparently unconcerned by Octavia's extended absence. More brandy, Your Grace. His butler appeared silently at his elbow. No. Nathaniel ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Bring me the Blackwood file again. He had read it a dozen times already. Every detail of her life, her family connections, her husband's debts. Nothing provided a clue to where she might have gone. It was as though she had deliberately erased herself from his reach, which, of course, she had every right to do. Their arrangement had been fulfilled, the debt forgiven. No further obligation existed between them. So why couldn't he forget her? Why did the memory of her lavender scent, her quiet dignity, her unexpected passion haunt him day and night? You're becoming obsessed, he muttered to himself, pacing the length of his study. She was a means to an end, nothing more. But even as he said the words, he knew them for the lie they were. Something had awakened in him that night at Glenmorrow, something he had thought long dead after Caroline's betrayal 15 years ago, something dangerous. The butler returned with the file. There's been a development, Your Grace. Lady Blackwood's sister received a letter today, postmarked from Cornwall. Nathaniel's head snapped up. Cornwall. Emberley, to be precise. A small fishing village on the southern coast. For the first time in months, Nathaniel smiled. Have my carriage prepared, and send word to ready my coastal property. He had found her. Now he just needed to understand why it mattered so much. The journey to Cornwall took 4 days, each mile increasing Nathaniel's uncertainty. What exactly did he hope to accomplish? Octavia had fulfilled her part of their arrangement. If she was indeed with child, she would contact him when the time came. Their agreement required nothing more, yet here he was, pursuing her across the country like a man possessed. Emberley revealed itself as his carriage crested the final hill, a cluster of stone cottages and fishing boats nestled in a protected cove. The late afternoon sun gilded the slate roofs and turned the sea to molten gold. Which house belongs to Lady Blackwood's cousin? He asked his driver. The stone one with blue shutters, Your Grace, on the cliff path. Nathaniel nodded. Take my luggage to the manor house. I'll walk from here. The salt-laden breeze tugged at his coat as he made his way through the village. Fishermen mending nets nodded respectfully, curious about the well-dressed stranger in their midst. Children paused in their games to stare. The cottage with blue shutters sat apart from the others, its small garden bright with early summer blooms. Nathaniel hesitated at the gate, suddenly aware of the impropriety of his unannounced arrival. What would he say? How could he explain his presence without revealing the turmoil that had driven him here? Before he could decide, the cottage door opened. An elderly woman emerged, carrying a basket of laundry. She spotted him immediately. Good afternoon, she called, setting down her basket. Are you lost, sir? Nathaniel approached, removing his hat. Not lost, madam. I'm looking for Lady Octavia Blackwood. I believe she's staying here. The woman's friendly expression cooled. And who might be asking? Nathaniel Thornfield, Duke of Thornfield. He saw recognition flash in her eyes, followed by wariness. I see. She studied him with disconcerting intensity. I'm Martha Harding, Octavia's cousin. She's mentioned you, Your Grace. May I speak with her? Martha hesitated. She's not receiving visitors. It's important. I'm sure it is. Martha folded her arms. But she was quite clear about not wishing to see you. The confirmation that Octavia had specifically anticipated and rejected his visit stung more than he'd expected. Please, he said, the word unfamiliar on his tongue. Just tell her I'm here. Martha's expression softened slightly. Wait here. She disappeared inside, leaving Nathaniel standing awkwardly at the garden gate. 5 minutes stretched to 10, then 15. Just as he was considering leaving, Martha returned. I'm sorry, Your Grace. She refuses to see you. Disappointment crashed through him. Did you tell her why I've come? You didn't tell me why you've come, Martha pointed out. Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration he normally wouldn't allow himself. I'm not entirely sure myself. Martha studied him for a long moment. She's with child, she said finally. Your child. But I suspect you already knew that. I hoped, he admitted. Our arrangement. Yes, she mentioned your arrangement. Martha's tone made the words sound distasteful, a most unusual way to secure an heir, if you don't mind my saying so. Nathaniel flinched. It was complicated. It always is. Mata sihu. Look, I don't know what passed between you two, but she's been unwell. The pregnancy has been difficult. Alarm shot through him. Difficult? How? Is she in danger? The doctor says she needs rest and calm. No excitement or distress. Martha's gaze sharpened. Your presence would provide both in abundance, I think. Nathaniel stepped back, his concern for Octavia overriding his desire to see her. I understand. Please at least tell her I called, and that he hesitated. Tell her I hope for her good health. As he turned to leave, Martha called after him. She walks the cliff path most mornings, when she's feeling strong enough. Around 7 o'clock. He paused, looking back. Thank you. I'm not doing it for you, Martha said bluntly. But she needs to resolve whatever lies between you before the child comes. Nathaniel nodded and continued down the path, his mind racing. Octavia was here, carrying his child, refusing to see him, and apparently suffering for it all. He made his way to the manor house he'd rented sight unseen, a property that had stood empty for years. The caretaker had done his best on short notice, but the place remained dusty and unwelcoming. Nathaniel barely noticed. That night, he penned a letter to his solicitor in London, instructing him to arrange the finest medical care available in Cornwall. The physician was to attend Lady Blackwood immediately, with no mention of who had arranged or paid for the service. It was the least he could do, given that he had caused her condition. The fact that his heart clenched painfully at the thought of her suffering was irrelevant. This was still about duty, about the air they had created together, nothing more. As he stood at the window, watching darkness settle over the village below, Nathaniel wondered who he was trying to convince. The fever swept through Emberley like wildfire, striking down fishermen and children first, then spreading to the women and elderly. The village doctor worked himself to exhaustion, moving from house to house as more fell ill each day. Nathaniel had been in Emberley for 2 weeks, catching only glimpses of Octavia on her morning walks. She had grown visibly with child, her movements slower, more careful. Each time he tried to approach, she'd turned away, retreating to her cousin's cottage before he could speak. Now, as he helped carry medicine from the manor house to the village, he couldn't help wondering if she had fallen ill as well. The thought chilled him more than the driving rain that had fallen for 3 days straight. Your Grace! A village boy splashed through the muddy street toward him. Mrs. Harding sent me. It's the lady. She's taken bad with the fever. Nathaniel's heart stuttered. Lady Blackwood. When? Last night, sir. The doctor's with her now, but Mrs. Harding says to hurry. Abandoning the medicine cart, Nathaniel ran through the downpour toward the blue-shuttered cottage. The door stood open, Martha's worried face appearing as he approached. Thank God you've come, she said, pulling him inside. The doctor says the fever's triggered early labor. She's only 7 months along. Terror, unlike anything Nathaniel had ever known, seized him. Where is she? Upstairs. The doctor's doing what he can, but Martha wrung her hands. He says we need a specialist from Thornport. The baby's coming too soon, and with the fever. I'll go myself. Nathaniel was already turning back toward the door. In this storm. The roads are washed out in places. I'll find a way. His voice brooked no argument. Just keep her alive until I return. The journey to Thornport was a nightmare of mud-choked roads and swollen streams. Twice Nathaniel had to abandon his horse and proceed on foot around impassable sections. By the time he reached the town, his fine clothes were ruined, his hands bloody from clearing debris. Dr. Winters, the specialist, required little persuasion once Nathaniel identified himself. Within an hour, they were on the return journey. The doctor's bag clutched tightly as they navigated the treacherous roads. Night had fallen by the time they reached Emberley. Lanterns blazed in the cottage windows, casting long shadows across the garden. The village doctor met them at the door, his face grave. "The child has come," he said quietly. "A boy, small but breathing." "And Lady Blackwood?" Nathaniel's voice sounded strange to his own ears. The doctor's hesitation told him everything. "She's very weak. The fever hasn't broken. I've done all I can." Nathaniel pushed past him, taking the stairs 2 at a time. In the small bedroom at the top, Martha sat beside the bed, bathing Octavia's forehead with a damp cloth. On a makeshift cot nearby, a tiny bundle lay swaddled in clean linen. But Nathaniel had eyes only for Octavia. Her face was ghostly pale against the pillows, her breathing shallow and labored. Her golden hair, now damp with sweat, spread across the pillow in tangled disarray. "I've brought Dr. Winters," he said, his voice cracking. "He's a specialist." Martha nodded, moving aside to make room. "She's been calling for you." In her delirium. The words twisted in his chest like a blade. He knelt beside the bed, taking Octavia's burning hand in his. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm here now." Her eyelids fluttered, but didn't open. Dr. Winters entered, immediately taking charge. "I need clean water, fresh linens, and privacy," he ordered. "Everyone out except Mrs. Harding." "I'm staying," Nathaniel said, his grip on Octavia's hand tightening. "Your Grace, I'm staying." Each word was carved in stone. The doctor assessed him for a moment, then nodded curtly. "Very well, but stay out of my way." What followed was the longest night of Nathaniel's life. Dr. Winters worked tirelessly, administering medicines, applying cool compresses, monitoring both mother and child with grim concentration. Outside, the storm raged on, as if heaven itself shared Nathaniel's anguish. Near dawn, when the rain finally ceased, Dr. Winters stepped back from the bed. "I've done all I can. The next few hours will determine." He left the sentence unfinished. Martha had fallen asleep in the chair by the window. The infant slept in his makeshift cot, his tiny chest rising and falling with reassuring regularity. Nathaniel remained kneeling beside the bed, Octavia's hand still clasped in his. "Don't leave me," he whispered, pressing her fingers to his lips. "Please, Octavia, don't leave me now." The admission he'd been fighting for months finally broke free. "I love you. God help me, I never meant to, but I do. I've been half mad without you. Nothing makes sense anymore. The thought of raising our son alone." His voice broke. "I can't do it. I need you." Silence answered him. Octavia's breathing remained shallow, her face still flushed with fever. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you," he continued, the words pouring out now that the dam had broken. "What I did, the way I used your desperation, was unforgivable. But if you'll just live, just give me the chance to make amends." He rested his forehead against their joined hands, exhaustion finally claiming him. "Please," he whispered one last time before sleep took him. He didn't see the slender figure standing in the doorway, didn't see the tears streaming down Lydia Blackwood's face as she watched the mighty Duke of Thornfield brought to his knees by love for her sister. Lydia had arrived that afternoon, summoned by Martha's urgent letter. She'd traveled through the storm, terrified of losing the only family she had left. Now, witnessing the raw emotion in Nathaniel's confession, she understood what her sister had never explained. This was no cold business arrangement. This was a love story neither participant had been prepared to acknowledge. Quietly, she withdrew, leaving Nathaniel to his vigil. There would be time for introductions later, if Octavia survived the night. Sunlight streamed through the cottage window, painting golden patterns across the bed covers. Octavia blinked slowly, her mind struggling to piece together fragmented memories. Pain, darkness, a voice calling her back from the edge. "You're awake." She turned her head, wincing at the effort. Nathaniel sat beside the bed, his appearance shocking her fully conscious. The immaculate Duke was gone, replaced by a man with rumpled clothes, stubbled jaw, and dark circles beneath his eyes. He looked as though he'd aged years and days. "The baby." Her voice was a raspy whisper. "He's well." Nathaniel's face softened, small but strong, like his mother. Relief washed through her. "I want to see him. Soon. You need to rest first." He reached for a glass of water, helping her drink. "You've been very ill. We almost lost you." The tenderness in his touch confused her. This wasn't the cold, calculating man who had proposed their arrangement. This was someone else entirely. "Why are you here?" she asked when she could speak again. Pain flashed across his face. "Where else would I be when the mother of my child was fighting for her life? Our arrangement didn't include." Damn the arrangement. The vehemence in his voice startled her. "Do you think I care about that now?" Octavia studied him, seeing the fear still lingering in his eyes, the exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "You've been here the whole time. 4 days." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "The doctor wasn't sure you'd survive the fever. Your sister arrived yesterday." "Lydia's here?" Alarm shot through her. "But her health is considerably better than yours at the moment," came a familiar voice from the doorway. Lydia entered, carrying a small bundle. "Someone wants to meet his mother." Tears filled Octavia's eyes as Lydia placed the infant in her arms. He was tiny, with a shock of dark hair that could only have come from his father. As she cradled him, his eyes opened, gray, like Nathaniel's. "He's perfect," she whispered. "He needs a name," Nathaniel said softly. Octavia looked up, meeting his gaze. "I thought you would choose. As part of our—" "Please don't say arrangement again." Nathaniel moved to sit on the edge of the bed. "I want to tear up that agreement and make a new one. Based on honesty this time." Lydia discreetly withdrew, closing the door behind her. "What sort of honesty?" Octavia asked, her heart beating faster despite her weakness. Nathaniel took a deep breath. "When I was 23, I fell in love with a woman named Caroline. I offered her everything, my name, my fortune, my heart. The night before our wedding, I found her in bed with my cousin, the same cousin who stands to inherit if I die without issue." Octavia's eyes widened. "That's why you needed an heir so desperately." He nodded. "I swore I'd never marry, never risk that kind of betrayal again. The entailment gave me the perfect excuse to remain detached. A business arrangement for an heir seemed safer. And now, she hardly dared breathe. Now I know there's no safety where the heart is concerned." His hand covered hers, where it rested on their son's blanket. "I love you, Octavia. I think I began falling the moment you knelt before me at Ravenmoor, soaking wet and still proud. I've been fighting it ever since." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I thought it was just me," she whispered. "I hated myself for developing feelings for the man who'd essentially blackmailed me. I was a monster." Self-loathing filled his voice. "Using your desperation that way, we both made choices." She squeezed his hand. "And now we have him." They both looked down at their son, sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. "Marry me," Nathaniel said suddenly. "Not for the arrangement, not for propriety. Marry me, because I cannot imagine life without you." Octavia studied his face, seeing the vulnerability beneath the strength, the warmth behind the frost. "What will society say? The scandal. Let them talk." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "We'll give them something worth gossiping about." 3 months later, as summer faded to autumn, Octavia Blackwood became the Duchess of Thornfield in a simple ceremony at the newly restored Willowbrook Manor. Their son, James Edward Thornfield, attended in his Aunt Lydia's arms, blissfully unaware of the unconventional path that had led to his parents' union. Society did indeed talk, but as the years passed and 3 more children joined the family, the whispers faded. What remained was the truth. Only Octavia and Nathaniel fully understood that sometimes the coldest business arrangement could kindle the warmest love.